Tara Miller, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Siggy.
So just before we hit record now, like I said to you before I started this podcast, you're one of the few people that I had on my short list that if I ever wanted to do a podcast, you would be on it. So here we are,
That's awesome.
about
Here we are.
7 years later. Yeah, about 7 years later, and that's kind of how we started out. I started Outrun in the Dark in 2018, and I think we started connecting as soon as started the Facebook group for our
Yeah.
customers in
Yeah.
2019. That blew
Yep.
up quickly and it became super popular, and all of a sudden
Right.
there was a group of thousands dealing with their own issues, and of course using running to help them. But with that territory came a lot of deep waters that I weren't prepared for, and luckily we're there to help out. So first and foremost, thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you.
I've had like both questions about specific things with the group, but also like on a personal level, and that's really why I wanted to talk to you today. Is because number one, you really do have a story to tell, and we'll of course get into all that. But also from like mental health perspective, you do come with a lot of experience, and both working in
Right.
the mental health field, but maybe most important for your experience going from the patient side of things to
Yeah.
eventually running a whole program for mental health. And that trauma informed care is rare and unique, and something that I've certainly been lucky enough to get help from when I've been asking you questions. So I'm hoping you could delve into some of those topics as we go along. But just to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself to those who might not know you, and where does your mental health journey start?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was 19 years old when my journey first started. I was a junior in college and I was a theater major. So I was very outgoing and very bubbly and very life of the party and just very extroverted. And that was just my nature. And I was always that way. I had lots of friends and, always really on top of things. And then around the fall of my junior year, I started isolating more and just like my friends didn't know what was going on with me. And I was in my room a lot. And I was so obsessed with the fact that I could be pregnant. But the funny thing was, there was no baby. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't even sexually active. But this was the start of my delusions, um, which would eventually lead to a diagnosis of schizophrenia, um, and multiple hospitalizations over my 20s, in my 20s. And basically, all I did all day was smoke cigarettes, drink coffee, and be pretty miserable. I was taking like 23 pills a day at 23 years old. My life was going pretty much nowhere, and the professionals that were in my life were also telling me that my life would go nowhere. So they were like, sign up for disability and get on Medicaid, and get a case manager, and this is kind of going to be your life. And that was a really hard pill to swallow at 20, 23, 24 years old when you're basically told to retire from life, and that your future doesn't hold very much except more hospitals and more pills. And that was never acceptable to me. I think that having that kind of life was never really acceptable. Even though I had a college degree, I managed to, even with my delusions, I managed to get through the last year of college. And then something shifted in me, um, probably around age 25. I was like, I can't live like this anymore. And that was the first kind of like foray into recovery that I had. And I was like, I deserve better. My life deserves better. Um, and it was the first step I took in recovery. And I, got off some of the medications and work with my doctor, found a doctor to work with me. put patched together. And I will say patched together because it was very fragmented at times, some recovery. And I said, I'm going back to work. And honestly, finding meaningful work was probably the most important thing for my recovery at that time. Um, because when I was sick and in the hospitals, I wasn't working. But I knew that I wanted better for myself. So I went back to work and I knew I wanted to work in mental health because I knew that I wanted to give back to a system that had kind of robbed me of a lot of years of my life. Um, so I started working in a residential program and for adults who were leaving the state hospital system. And that sparked a fire in me, and I really became serious about wanting to do this as a career. So, 2 years later, I moved to the West Coast of the States and made my home in San Francisco. And shortly after that, I moved to Seattle and I finished grad school. Yeah, and then I've been working in the field for the past 23 years doing multiple things, case management, outpatient, inpatient, drug and alcohol, intellectual and developmental disabilities, um, sexual assault survivors, and domestic violence survivors. So I've kind of done the gamut of everything you can in mental health, but it wasn't until I turned probably 40 that I got really serious about my recovery. And I realized that smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and just kind of surviving was also not serving me. So it's like every decade that I kind of faced this illness with was a decade of growth. So my 20s were about survival. My 30s were about kind of going back to work and getting my degree. And then my 40s were really about this kind of like radical self-care that I, put into motion for myself. And that's when I really got serious about fitness and working out and running. Once I quit smoking, I figured I needed something to do instead of sit around and smoke cigarettes. So I started running, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So that's my story, and I still live with schizophrenia. I still have bad days. I still struggle, but it's much more manageable now than it ever was because I did about 9 years ago get really serious about my recovery and quit smoking and really um, got down to the basics of what I needed to do to make my life better. Um, yeah, and I found community. I found community in Outrun the Dark. I found community with some of my mentors who are now friends, who were writing books and doing great things and holding retreats and all of that and really found a community that supported me. Even during the pandemic, we were creating community. Um, so yeah, so I credit all of my recovery to this kind of inner resilience and this kind of like radical self-care and um yeah and finding my community. So that's I think the most important thing is not being isolated and having that sense of community. And that's what Outrun the Dark is. And we see that in the posts that folks make, right? Like we see that in their posts, this kind of like reaching out for help and having that community answer back tenfold. It's really a
Hmm.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for sharing. There's a lot to unpack there, and I have many questions. But
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
start with some things that popped out for me. So that inner resilience that you credit some of your recovery to, where do you think that comes from? Is that innate, or is that something that you've like built over the years?
I think it's both. I think it's something that you have inside of you that you need to cultivate. I think everybody has that inner resilience. But because of trauma, because of shame or guilt or, low self esteem or not taking accountability for your wellness, I think it gets covered up. It's kind of like an onion. There's this core of inner resilience, and then we have all these folds, right? We have all these layers. Um, But yeah, and I think that the key to really cultivating that inner resilience is finding the things that bring you joy and doing them. I think a lot of times we get caught up in our feelings and our emotions, what we feel and how we react. When really we can be focusing on what we do to make ourselves better, and what actions we can take to kind of combat those feelings and those emotions, um, and really face them head on and realize that, every situation is temporary. The pain doesn't last forever, the hurt doesn't last forever. So what can I do in my life, or what can I do in the lives of others that's going to really strengthen that resilience? And part of that was finding fitness and finding, a way to navigate mental health, and using fitness to navigate that instead of having fitness to lose weight, or having fitness to, be the bro at the gym, or, whatever it was really about a mental health journey, and using that for good, not gain. So yeah, but I think it can also be cultivated too. Like, I think we all have this inner resilience, but I think we can grow it by doing those things and taking care of ourselves. And I see so many folks on Outrun the Dark, and they're like, "Oh, like tore my ACL but still going out for a run." It's like that's not self-care, that's pushing yourself to a limit that's not healthy. So what can you do besides, you tore your ACL? What can you do besides running that will bring you joy? What can you do in your life that, turns those negative, situations into something positive, and how can you give back? So yeah,
What was some of
I
those
think
things for you that brought you joy?
yeah. So, I really got into, I was never a journaler in my younger years. I tried numerous times, failed miserably, hated it. But I found that journaling, especially in the evenings before I go to bed, is a really good brain dump. Just not to even have structure, just stream of consciousness, writing, um, and really, letting that kind of get into my truth and examining some of the things that, I tell myself, the stories that I tell myself, that may not necessarily be true, and unpacking all of that through written word has really been helpful for me. Moving my body in different ways, like yoga and Pilates, and getting into breath work, and even doing like 15 minutes of breath work a night. Guided meditation has helped a lot. I never thought I would be one to say like meditation is really great, but it really is. And it looks different for everyone. Some people sit in silent meditation. I choose guided meditation. And I found, those resources online, and use them. Having this sense of spirituality has been really helpful for me too. I think that, whether you subscribe to a particular religion or not is neither here nor there, but having something that you believe in, that may be greater than yourself, is whether it's energy or the universe or a god, or whatever you call it, having that sense that there's something that, is greater than you is really helpful. So finding my spiritual side as well, and then just finding like things that along the way that make me happy, like doing even a 20-minute workout is better than no workout, or spending time with family, and laughing. Just finding somebody to laugh with can be huge. And finding, even if it's little funny quips on the internet, like little funny videos. I'm obsessed with that video, that I have one daughter. I understand, but is she by the same father? And I was like, "Oh my god, it's just funny." Like, it just is a little pick me up in the middle of your day. Um, and really just finding those moments of joy and finding community, and writing poetry helped me. I never thought I was a poet, but anybody's a poet, everyone's a poet. Um, just getting that release, and cleaning even is therapeutic for me, just, like taking everything off the shelves and making everything, rearranging something is therapeutic. So you can find those moments of joy in the everyday, right? It doesn't have to be this thing that you spend a lot of money on, or these things that, cost a lot, or take up an inordinate amount of time. Like 20 minutes in your day is to sit and just, be, is so important. So yeah, so those are some of the things that I do, um, just to, and I think you probably see the rainbows in my room. I have this little like sun catcher thing, and even just watching the rainbows in my room brings me joy. Like, it's little things. It doesn't have to be, this big to do. It's just like these little things. Like my cat is sleeping next to me, and he brings me joy. It's those little things that we find, and the things that we can concretely do, um, and why we do them, and also figuring out why we do them. So, it's not enough to say, I'm going to go for a walk. Well, what does going for a walk bring you? Like, what does it do for you? Um, going for a walk is generic, but when you put meaning behind it, is when it starts to become self-care.
How can you make 20-minute walk be like more meaningful than just like, because I would think that just
Yeah.
going out the door and start walking would be a thing, but yeah, please.
Yeah. It's you can get creative with it, and you can listen to your favorite podcast. You can listen to this podcast. You can listen to meditation music. You can see how many, spots of green, or how many birds you see, or how many animals you see along the trail. You can make it into anything you want. And just being in nature is innately therapeutic.
Mhm.
Um whether you're walking down, through the woods in a trail, or whether you're walking in the middle of your city, it really, it makes no difference. And, finding those things of connection, um, what you connect to, like, is it stopping off for an ice cream after your walk and treating yourself, like, is it picking up a rock and painting that rock when you get home to say, like, like, I love you, or you're the best, or, and keeping that rock for yourself. Is it taking pictures along the way and seeing a building that's beautiful, or seeing, a person that, is on the street that's dressed really cool. It's finding those things that, gives meaning. It's not just a walk, it's how can we make this personalized to us? Um, so I think that's really important.
That's great. And when you say, like, I'm also big into guided meditation. I think that's a good like gateway drug to get into meditation. Do you have any? I use like Insight Timer, which is a free app, or at least was the last time I checked it. Do you have any favorite like meditation teachers you listen to, or any starting points where you can include them in the show links as well?
Yeah, on Spotify, her name is Tara Brock, and she has a channel. She wrote a book called Radical Compassion, which I recommend to everyone. It's just a brilliant book, whether you're Buddhist or not. She, yeah, she has Radical Acceptance and Radical Compassion are two of her books. And they're brilliant. And like I said, you don't have to be Buddhist to really understand what she's talking about. The theme of it is pretty universal. But she has a Spotify channel, and she has like about 18 to 25-minute guided meditations on there. And I use those. I have Spotify, so I use those. And it's actually just really great because you can go on and just choose one and listen. And she also has a podcast, which she has on there too. And she just talks about, letting go and, finding your center and different, she has different topics, but I really enjoy um her, and her voice is so just relaxing and lulling. It's her voice is just really magical too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I second Tara Brach. I read the Radical Acceptance book. I didn't know she had one, Radical Compassion. So I have to check that out. But yeah,
Yeah.
she has a loving kindness meditation on like 20 minutes ish guided meditation, and I found that really helpful as a recovering self-loader. I think that's a very good place to start
Yeah.
on the acceptance path. So we'll include that in the show notes as well. But
Yeah, that would be great.
totally, yeah. And I think like is one that was also one of the audience questions we received for today. Is like what you do other than running for your self-care, because I think from the late yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, a couple weeks ago, or it was actually a couple months ago, I was in a store and they had watercolors, just like a pack of watercolors and watercolor paper, and I was like, why don't I try that? I'm the worst painter in the world. I'm the worst artist. I can't like draw a stick figure, but it's fun. It brings me joy. Just like putting colors on paper, and then, drawing a picture, making a picture. I made a picture of, in memory of my cat that I lost 3 years ago. Like just little things like that that you don't think of, just walk into a store and see watercolors and think, hey, that's something I want to try. Like, I think we have disregarded play as part of our lives. And I think that the more we can incorporate play and fun things, to not to do them for a purpose, not to do them because you're going to hang it in the Louvre, not to do it because you're going to sell it and get money, but just purely for the fact that it can bring you relaxation and joy. I think is something people have lost along the way. And I see them, I see some people in the group like, oh, I had to go out for my run today. I had to run 8 miles today. You didn't. Like you can really like pick something else up and try that. And I wish everybody would take the time to find those things that do bring them joy and experiment and get creative and play and have fun. Because that's what this is all about.
That's great. And I was wondering like how for the I'm not sure if this came naturally to you, but like how would someone who is new to self-care and thought self-care was only running, going to a physiotherapist, or taking maybe a bubble bath and like and lie there and load themselves, like how would you start building like a self-care routine? Is there's like 20 minutes 5 times a week, or how would you like help someone who was supposed to start it?
I think everybody approaches self-care differently, and I wanna stress that it goes beyond just, "Oh, I did a bubble bath night for myself," or, "Oh, I got a mani-pedi for myself," or it's not necessarily those things. It's really about changing your mindset. Like, self-care is so, um thought driven and action driven, um that I think that it gets lost sometimes in these things that we feel like we do to take care of ourselves, but it's really getting down to what matters to me in my life, and how can I cultivate that? How can I? It's almost like growing a garden, right? Like we plant seeds and then we nurture them. You can plant a seed, but is it going to grow if you don't water it, if you don't, give it sunlight, if you don't, have the right soil composition? Like it's not going to grow. It's not going to grow into anything. And then soon you're just going to have this like garden of weeds that aren't anything. But if you plant that seed and you nurture it and give it water and make sure it has sunlight and, make sure that the soil is the right, you're going to have this beautiful garden. Um, that self-care is that cultivation. So it's not doom scrolling at 3 a.m. It's not, like, oh, I have to run again or I have to do this again. It's like, no, like stop. What brings you joy? Like, is it just going out for a nice meal? Is it ordering Chinese food on a Friday night because you want to treat yourself? Is it coloring your hair? And those all seem like simple things, but like even finding a podcast or finding a book that you can read and better yourself. Like it's all about, finding ways to really emphasize what you believe in and what brings meaning to your life. That's the best way I can describe self-care is what you find, what you do that brings meaning to your life.
Mm. And what are some common mistakes you see or hear when people are trying to do self care?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. Okay, let me back up. I don't think there's any wrong way to do self-care. I don't think there's any wrong way to do it, right? You like a bubble bath, girl, take your bubble bath. Like that's great. And I admit that I don't have a bath in my apartment. I have a stand-up shower and it's horrible because I just want to take a bath some days. But there's no wrong way to do self-care, but it's how you approach it. Are you doing it for the wrong reasons? There's no wrong way to do self-care, but are you doing it because you feel like you have to do it? Or are you doing it because it truly brings joy to your soul? Like this morning, like I got up and I worked out this morning. Did I work out all week? No. I was tired. I slept in. I had to manage my week. It was a rough week at work. But this morning I got my, hour of workout in and I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because it brings me joy. I did it because it makes me feel good. I did it because it nourishes my body. I did it because I needed to feel movement. I wanted to listen to some good songs. I wanted to I wanted to laugh along with my favorite Peloton instructor. Like, I don't do it because I have to or because there's some pressure that's put on me to, I don't feel like, um, this is something that needs to get done or if I don't do it something bad will happen. This is just doing something purely for the joy of doing it. I think is what self-care is.
That's I understand better now because like I would like guess that it's easy to like do it for the wrong reasons, like ordering Chinese. If you do that 5 days a week, just for the short term pleasure of it, then it becomes a bad thing, and that probably isn't synonymous with self care anymore. But if it is as a treat for a long, I mean, it's if it's intention behind it, I guess that's what matters. Then it can be part of a of a self care routine. And one of the things you mentioned there, which I'm also a big fan of, is journaling. I journal in the morning and I kind of just get whatever I can down on 2 pages of paper. And I have a love for old fountain pens, but that's a different story. But I do like that the paper is good quality and thick, and there's a fountain pen involved. But onto like the technique of how you do it. Do you have any prompts that you use, or like to get yourself started, or is it just like emptying the mind? What kind of
Yeah,
how do
I
you do
think
it?
I've I've worked with both. I've done prompts, which I think are helpful sometimes, just to get the juices flowing. And I also just like free like today is Friday and this is my day. blah, 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 blah. Just to, just like I said, that stream of consciousness, just to get it out of my head and what's going on. And I write on purpose very messy, because my head goes really fast and I try to write as fast as my head is going. So my handwriting is really messy and I can't go back and reread it, which I think is a good thing. So I don't want to be able to be, I don't want to go back and be like, oh, what was I thinking on August 3rd? I just want to like dump it and have it be there and have it be just that. Like that's what I needed it for, just to get that release, that brain dump. And I don't want to reread it. I don't need to reread it. I lived it. So it's just that release and that processing that happens when you write things down. I think it's one thing to write things down, but I think you need to process as you write it down. Um, but I have done some like guided journaling with like prompts, and what that looks like. And I've done them mostly in workshops that I've done. Like there's my friend Stephanie is an artist and she does online workshops and retreats. And I've done some, guided journaling things with her, and she's amazing. I've done writing workshops with the author Jen Pasteloff, and she's amazing. She just came out with a new book and it's great. But she does a lot of like prompts as far as journaling goes. And I find them really helpful um, to get out some like specific things like, um, like where do you stand in your power the most? Or, where was a time that you said no that was really important to you? Or what would it mean to be a bad girl? Like different prompts to just get you thinking about something in a different way can be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll second that. When it comes to prompts, I usually just riff, but I have found it helpful, and this is very specific since English is my second language and
Right,
Norwegian is my first. Those
right.
two voices are completely different, which I
I
find
bet
fascinating. So
that is
like
really fast.
whenever I'm back home in Norway and write, like it's very like the aperture of my dreams have just shrunk immensely. But whenever I'm abroad, and because I used to study in Australia when I was, grown up, or 19, 20, and
Okay.
so I don't have that childhood in English. I only have like my grown-up years. And for some
Yeah,
reason, the English voice, whenever I write in the English voice, that's the dreamer. Like nothing's out of bounds, which I just
I love
find fascinating. So depending on what kind of mood I want myself to be in, or how I'm feeling that morning, how I show up, I get to write in either of those voices. And I could like stop myself when I'm writing in Norwegian and be like, this is so pessimistic, this is bullshit, you're like short selling yourself. And I'll
yeah,
like just mid page switch to English, and there's a shift happening where I just
interesting.
start becoming more optimistic and just have greater hopes for the future and more belief in the future. So it's a side bar, but yeah, I just found that super fascinating. And also on the prompts, I found that helpful as well. If I'm having something that I'm thinking over, a decision to make, or whatever it is, if it's a sticky situation, I write as if like a mentor of mine or someone I would love the advice
Yeah,
from is telling me that. So this is 100% something I picked up from someone else, but it does help because I like know,
yeah,
because like sometimes like I have an older brother and I ask him for advice all the time, but
yeah,
I know him well enough, like I would know what he would say to me. So like just by thinking what would he say, I could like
yeah.
easily write out what he could tell me. And of course my brother I can actually ask, but I can't ask, I don't know, if I wanted to ask a Stoic philosopher or a president, a previous president, that's not so
Yeah,
easy. So it's good. I think it's just a
right.
helpful exercise to get a different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the one prompt that has, which I thought was like 100% woo woo, and I'm fairly like agnostic, but I'm also like fairly secular in my beliefs. But the author Elizabeth Gilbert, I'm not sure if you've heard
Oh
any of
yeah.
her podcasts, but yeah, she's a gem. I didn't know, like I just stumbled across her. Like I would never have like voluntarily put on the podcast by someone who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, as a guy that's like very, I don't know, it's just not something I would do voluntarily, but I came across it, and
Right.
I listen to every podcast she does because it's just so much fun, and she has such an
Yeah.
interesting perspective to life and her work. But one of the
Yeah.
prompts she uses is their universe or God or whatever placeholder you want to use, and it
Yeah.
says, "Dear universe, what will you have me know? Like, what will you have me know
Oh,
today?"
love
And I think
that.
that's like, whatever, for whatever reason, like I just, when you sit down and write, you think you know what you have in mind, but as soon as you get a question from the outside, like a totally different story comes forth. And I'd be sitting
Yeah.
down, I want to be writing about the sun shining, the taste of my coffee. Like I'll put, force some kind of setting on my writing. But if
Yeah.
you put a prompt like that, something in my subconscious have been thinking about things that I want myself to know, but I haven't found a way to do it. And that prompt is kind of like a gateway for my subconscious to tell myself something that I need to know. And as
Yeah.
a it's for me, it's like some recurring themes that come up more often than not. And one that's the universe keeps telling me is like, you're loved, which is, I find like
Uh,
really strange, but yeah.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
take it however you want, but those are some prompts that
Yeah.
I found helpful.
Yeah. One that I found really helpful that I did one time, and it will make, like, it made me sob actually, like a child, like I was crying, was write a love letter to yourself in the voice of someone who loves you. So it would be, "Dear Tara, if you could see what I see," and then you go in the voice of someone who loves you. If you could see what I see. And it's just like a beautiful exercise in self-love and gratitude for the people that love you. And if you could see what someone who loves you sees, um, it's really powerful. It's really powerful. Um, but yeah, but I love that you found Elizabeth Gilbert, and her book Big Magic is a really beautiful book. Um I highly recommend it for everyone, and she talks a lot in Big Magic about creativity and play, and it's so important to think of those things, especially because she is a person who has experienced great loss. Um and she did a video on grief once, and it was her dancing, and after she had lost her partner. And it's probably one of the most beautiful like physical shows of grief I have ever seen, because I think grief looks different for everyone. So yeah, but she's brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I listened to the podcast where she talked about her grief and losing her partner, and that's probably one of the top 5 podcasts I've heard ever. So yeah, highly recommend checking that out, and we'll link all of that to the show
Perfect.
notes so people can check it out. But back to your, we're not finished with your story yet. There's still a lot to unpack here, but one thing that's stuck out because you had some. I listened to a earlier podcast you did as well, where you talked about pool water crazy. Can you
But
can
yes,
you
yes,
what
yes,
is what's the difference between
yes.
tequila crazy and pool water
Oh,
crazy, right?
yeah, fajita crazy and pool water crazy. So it's interesting. I had it was like 2008, and I had just joined Facebook, and through the magic of social media, I connected with my old college roommate. And we hadn't talked for years. It had been we lived together when I lived in New York City right after I graduated from undergrad, back in the 90s. And I hadn't seen him for like 10 years. And I reached out and he said, like, what have you been up to? And I'm like, well, I went a little crazy. And he's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, like there's two kinds of crazy. There's, you go to the restaurant and you think, I'm feeling a little crazy. I'm going to order the fajitas and some tequila tonight. That's fajita crazy, but pool water crazy is when and I actually did this. I had a delusion one time that told me if I baptized myself with pool water, it would keep me from going insane. So there I was down at the pool. Like in the pool with all of my clothes, putting pool water over my head and my parents who were great supporters my whole life throughout the whole illness and everything. They were there for me and I lived with them for a few years to get myself back on my feet and they were a huge part of my recovery, but they were kind of like, what are you doing? And I was like, the pool water is keeping me from going crazy, keeping me from going insane. And that was very much part of my delusional system. So that was the difference between pool water crazy and fajita crazy. And I always said
Yeah.
if I write a book, it will be called Pool Water Crazy. um, and I toy with the idea of writing a book all the time. Um, but I love storytelling and I love,
Hmm.
sharing my story. And if it makes a difference to one person, then that's my job is done. But yeah,
Yeah, and you do write, and I hope you write that book. I've been reading your pieces that you are writing on mental
yeah,
health and schizophrenia. And one of the lines that really stuck out to me and is just on the topic that you just mentioned, how your family has been of great help and they saw you in the pool baptizing yourself, and they helped you, at least as you wrote it, they helped you transition into getting help and to a life of getting help. That was the start of getting help. I wouldn't know, maybe it wasn't even recovery in the beginning, but it was the start of just the minuscule steps of getting better. And one of the lines that stood out was in one of the pieces that you wrote, you say, my dad is no longer with us, but in his last days, I felt absolutely honored to take care of him as he did me when I was in need and entering a new phase of existence.
yeah. And that was really powerful. Like I might even cry talking about it, but that was really a powerful experience. My dad was diagnosed with cancer and his illness progressed very quickly. Um and within a month from diagnosis he had passed away. But my mother and I took care of him and it was really powerful to be able to reciprocate that care, um, that he had taken care of me so much when I was in and out of the hospital and just being like my rock and my sounding board and like listening to me and really grounding me throughout my whole life. So to be able to give him that care at the end of his life and let him know that I was going to take care of my mom, which my mom lives with me now and we're the Golden Girls, but just knowing that those roles switch. There comes a time when, it's very interesting when you're growing up and your parents are your parents. And then there's this like kind of like unseen shift where roles kind of reverse, right?
Hmm.
And you become the caretaker of your parents. And um that is probably the hardest job I've ever had, but the most rewarding job I've ever had, being a caretaker to my parents. My mom is 82 now and still kicking, but she needs a lot of help, and it's my honor as a daughter, to give that back to her, for everything that she's given me, and it's not out of pity, or it's not out of, a feeling of, well, you did this, give and take. It isn't about that. It isn't like you did this for me, I have to do this for you. It's more of like, this is my gift. Um, this is my gift of reciprocity. So yeah, but aging is never, and as I age, and I am faced with this new life of perimenopause and my body changing and my hormones changing. It's like, I'm stepping into this midlife very gracefully, um, and kind of rolling with all the changes that it brings me. So it's aging is a weird process. And I learn every day. I really do. I learn something every day. Um, and my hair is more gray than I would like it to be, and but but my wisdom has grown so much as well. Which is really, I wouldn't trade for the world. So
No, no, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And as I recall, like this happened all with you in the 90s, and as I understood, like, and in the 90s, mental health was much of a thing, and definitely not anxiety, depression, and
right.
I was a bit sad to hear that when you told that story, because I had the belief that everything was great in the 90s. Like, as a
Yeah.
child born in the late 80s, I just grew up with like rose-colored glasses for everything in 90s.
Yeah.
But listening to the podcasts you did earlier and talking about how mental health wasn't a thing back then, it really yeah,
Yeah.
broke down the dreams I had. But how did your parents know how to handle it? Like, I would imagine most parents be like, "What do we do
Yeah.
now?"
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think there was an element of what do we do now, and they just kind of walked right beside me. They didn't plan, they didn't try to force treatment on me. It was just like, I don't, and I think that it helped. My mom was a nurse, before she retired, and she had worked in psych for a few years as well. And I think she had this kind of understanding that something was wrong, with her daughter, which is a horrible pill for any parent to swallow, is that, your only daughter, your only child is struggling this much.
Hmm.
Um, and she didn't know, what to do. And there weren't programs back then. We're very lucky in 2025 to have, crisis stabilization programs and mobile crisis teams that can come to you when you're, in crisis, calling, a hotline. There was none of that back in the 90s, the early 90s, in the early 2000s, so there just weren't those resources. So the resources were, you go to the hospital when you're sick. And that was like ingrained in, the culture. And it's still ingrained in the culture. And I think it's still ingrained in a lot of people who deal with a serious mental illness, that when you get sick, you go to the hospital for help. But hospitals are not really helpful. They can keep you safe. And in that way, I guess they're helpful, but a lot of harm is done um, in carceral settings like that. A lot of harm is done. And a lot of trauma is kind of perpetrated on folks who are going through a crisis, whether it's seclusion or restraint or forced medication or just being there against your will or not being told what your treatment
Mm,
is. There's a lot of harm that goes on in hospitals, and I went through a lot of that harm when I was hospitalized, in hopes of getting help, in hopes of seeking help, was actually doing more harm than good. And I think we've come a long way in our treatment, but I think we still have so much further to go because of stigma and shame and guilt that is associated with being disabled or having a mental illness. Um, so I think we have a ways to go, but I see, there are groups like this, like Outrun the Dark, and groups like NAMI and Mental Health America, and different advocacy groups are slowly starting to break that stigma down. And I think that we need to invest in those advocacy groups and invest in breaking down stigma, so we can get the help that we need and really focus on where we want to see treatment go in the next 10 years.
yeah. And what do you think? Why do you think our culture still has that stigma around mental health? And can it ever be broken or disappear?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with ignorance, just not knowing. I think that there's this, we the media perpetrates stigma a lot. You always hear, oh, the shooter was seriously mentally ill. The shooter had
Mm-hmm.
mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
The killer was schizophrenic. So I think we hear that a lot. Um, Instead of hearing good stories about people with mental illness. And honestly, their studies show that folks with serious mental illness are not violent and are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of violence. So, um, I think that media has a horrible influence on stigma. And there aren't enough stories being told about people who have gone through this experience of a serious mental health condition and have come out on the other side and are truly doing good work. And there are pockets of them on social media and YouTube, and there's people who are reclaiming the word schizophrenic and all of that. But I think part of it is just not knowing. There's still a group of
Yeah.
people that think schizophrenia is multiple personality disorder, and yeah, and that's not the case. They don't even understand what the diagnosis of schizophrenia means. Um, so yeah, and we hear about, oh, he keeps his room so clean, he must be OCD, or oh, geez, she's really moody, she must be bipolar, or I'm feeling bipolar today, or the weather is so bipolar. We hear those terms being thrown around, and we don't really realize the damage that could be done by that.
Yeah. And like, if you had a magic wand, or if you had the possibility to do something about it, or talk to pretty much everyone with a teleprompter or something, like, how can we eradicate shame or the stigma on mental health?
Oh,
What would be
that's
like your attack?
yeah, that's a big question. That's a really big question. And I wish that, we could kind of, I think that there's two kinds of stigma. There's the stigma that exists in our communities and in our society, and then I think there's the stigma that exists within
Yeah.
ourselves. this kind of like self stigma. Um, and I see, education and training and really, um, the first thing I did when I was diagnosed was get a book of medications and really research the medications that I was prescribed. Um, and I see so many people just like, oh, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, and this is what my doctor says will make me better. But it's not that. It's not that. It's really about, if you are choosing to take medication, you do it with a lens of I'm going to educate myself about what I'm putting in my body. Um, and really, I think that education is key to to breaking down that shame, and really understanding what you're facing. Um, we like to label things all the time. We like to put them in a box, um, and have them be nice and neat and tied with a bow. And they rarely are like that. I follow several people on social media who also have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and we're all very different. Our symptoms are very different. Our experiences are very different. It's like we don't even have the same, disorder, but we do. There are threads of commonality through what we experience, but for some people, their hallucinations are tantamount in their symptomology profile, and for me, it's my delusions, that my head tells me is true. So it's very different for everybody, and I think the more that we know about ourselves and what our red flags are, and what we need to be looking out for that could be a signal that things are going downhill, having a plan of some kind, a crisis plan, a RAP, a wellness recovery action plan, having something, that kind of looks at what I do when I'm well and what happens when I'm not well, can be really, really helpful for people, trying to navigate this illness, especially for people who have been diagnosed young, in their 20s or in their teens. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is I think this is a new word for certainly me, but also some of the audience. Like I've only known like stigma and the shame, definitely more of a self thing, but like self stigma, is that shame or is that something else?
Yeah, I think it's something else. I think it's this this story that we've learned, from society, that we've turned inward, right? I think it's a story that we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, that we are, we believe the voices of the people who tell us that we're nothing. Um, we're ashamed of having a disability or a diagnosis. We don't feel like we can fully participate in our own lives because of our diagnosis, all of which are not true. We can fully participate in life with a diagnosis. And I don't mean being a working, like good tax-paying citizen.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's whatever recovery looks like for you. And
Mm.
for some people that might be, doing a podcast. For some people that might be speaking at a local town hall. But for some people it might just be going about their life and finding those pockets of joy that we talked about earlier. But it looks very different for everyone, and I think that, one of the keys to breaking down that self stigma is really taking accountability um for your own life, and for what you how you carry yourself and your behaviors. um I think that there was a point in time in my life, and this was, like, probably in my 40s, when I quit smoking. It was like, okay, Tara, like, take accountability for that. Like, you're wheezing, you can't go up a flight of steps without getting out of breath. Like, when is it, when are you going to wake up and realize that this is hurting you, not helping you? So it was really about taking accountability for my own wellness and my own um, issues, and I was like, okay, the smoking needs to stop. Like, it's not helping anything. And I think it's the same with, like, self-loathing or, those other behaviors, that stories that we tell ourselves that, don't benefit us. It's like, okay, that served us for a period of time, but it's time to let that go, and really get serious about wellness, and what that looks like, instead of being so illness focused. So there's illness focused and there's wellness focused. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that last part you uh nudged onto is important as well. Like I would be self-loathing about having or be self-loathing about being self-loathing, but I think it's very
Yeah,
important to, like you said, that the self-loathing served a purpose, or it tried to serve a purpose of keeping you
right,
safe, or whatever it
right.
did, it had a purpose, or else you wouldn't have had it.
Yes,
So it's
right.
like important to kind of wrap that whatever mechanism you had with love, and be kind to whatever it was trying to serve, because it was trying to do you good. So
Yeah,
that's totally
yeah.
something I can relate to. And I just want to know, like, the RAP, is that RAP, like
It's
recovery action plan?
WRAP. Yeah,
Okay, W.
Wellness
Okay,
Recovery yeah,
okay,
WRAP, Recovery Action Plan.
okay.
And that was started actually in Vermont by, she, Mary Ellen Copeland is the woman who wrote about rap. And I think it just changed hands to Advocates for Human Potential. But if you Google WRAP rap or Wellness Recovery Action Plan, you can find templates and booklets and information about what it is. But I like it because it focuses on what keeps us well, like what do we need to do to stay well, and then also, like, what do we need to be aware of when things are starting to break down? Like, they call them
Mm,
triggers and I call them activators, but what
mm,
do we need to be aware of when things start going downhill, and what can we do? Um, what are those things that we do every day or do once a month that, really combat against those things? Um, yeah, and Pat Deegan, who's a big voice in the recovery world, she is actually diagnosed as schizophrenia. Um, and she went on to get her PhD, and she's a researcher now, and she's really amazing. If you haven't heard of her, I highly recommend going on YouTube and listening to her speak, because she's pretty brilliant. But she has this concept of personal medicine. And personal medicine is kind of reclaiming that term medicine, um, and it's really the things that we do to keep ourselves well, and why we do them, as opposed to just taking pills or just going to a therapist, or it's not anything that's prescribed for you, it's what you prescribe for yourself.
mm.
So yeah, so that's another interesting kind of concept in recovery. And it's not just, I think everybody thinks, oh, like there's a magic pill out there that will
Yeah.
somehow make me whole again. And it's really a combination of a lot of things. It can be meds, it can be, your belief system, it can be exercise, it can be yoga, it can be meditation, it can be journaling, it can be talking to friends, it can be finding your community, it can be going to AA meetings, whatever, it's the school of whatever works,
Yeah.
is really what it's about. But yeah, but I highly recommend, if you haven't heard of Pat Deegan, Deegan, to go to YouTube, check out one of her videos, because they're pretty brilliant. So
Cool. I'll have to check that out. It's been a while since I have checked on it, but I do have like notes on my iPhone from, like, it's an action plan for when I'm when I'm stuck, either like feeling depressed, or if I'm angry, or if I'm feeling stuck, if I'm feeling unmotivated. And I have like certain things that I do
I
depending
love that.
on what I'm struggling with. So little did I know I was making my own little rap, if that's
Yeah.
if that's
Yeah,
anything like
definitely.
it. But some
Definitely.
things that help me, like just what I've found found to be helpful in my experience is like there's always some physical movement involved. It doesn't have to be running. It can
Mhm.
be, it just depends on my condition at a time. So
Yeah,
like if it's like if I'm stressed, like yin yoga is
yeah,
magical.
yeah,
And if but if you're angry, at a 15-minute run as fast as you can, like I would dare anyone to go run a 5K as fast as they can, and
right.
then try and be angry afterwards. It's just not possible.
Yeah,
So like
yeah,
so do the physical movement that's like your ailment requires. That's been, I found that super helpful. Also, a component of my my reaction plan is usually some form of perspective. So either like
yeah,
reading what dead people have written many thousands or hundreds of years ago is so helpful to get out of your own mind and out of your little bubble that thinks that you're so special. All the people that now are so special, because it's just so you just need to read one line from, like, you know, as Roman emperor or someone who thought they were the bee's knees back then, and they're been gone for thousands of years. And
yeah,
as one podcaster asked the question once, "Do you know any Sumerians?" Like that was like a whole people. Maybe, of course, you shouldn't laugh, but it's like, do you really know any
yeah, yeah,
Sumerians? Just to kind of like understand how small we are in the span of humans, but also like the universe. So that some kind of perspective, either a piece or a book or something to get kind of a perspective on my timeline in the in the span of the universe.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
helpful.
for
And
sure.
what's the third one? Action, perspective, and yes, a loved one, someone that's
Yeah,
been like close to you, like either like you did with your kind of reverse loving kindness meditation prompt where you write to yourself a love letter from someone you love. But like for me, calling a friend, like, because when I'm stuck in my head and you become so negative towards yourself, uh, that's like such an illusion, and nothing better to break that than a friend or a family member, because they just know that that's complete bullshit. You know, that just doesn't mean
exactly.
anything, and just
They will
some
call.
they will call you out. They will call you out, and it doesn't. You don't even have to talk about, "Hey, I'm feeling low. I'm feeling bad." But just like
Right.
having a normal conversation with someone that you know intimately, they will just, by talking to you normally, you will kind of feel more grounded, and you understand, okay, this is just going through something, and okay, maybe I'm struggling with this. But yeah, those are
Yeah.
some go-tos that I've found. I didn't have a word for it until now, but is this anything related to like a real life rap, or is this like kind of a different
Yeah.
territory?
No, for sure. Like it's about, it's about your toolbox, really. And what do we put in our toolbox. And for you it's action and flipping that perspective and you know phoning a friend or a family member, like those are all things that we can do, right? All action steps that we can do, um that will ultimately like guide us and help us. And it's not just enough to say like I want to feel better. Well, what does that mean? Like what does that mean? Like let's break that down a little bit. What does it mean to feel better? Like, and then, you can't like feel your way into feeling better. You have to do something to feel better. Um, And that's why I love that, you had mentioned, Siggy, that flip in perspective. Sometimes that's key to just like really getting yourself out of your head. And that's what I had to do. I was in a job that I didn't like. And it was like getting hard to get up every morning and go do this work day after day. And I really had to flip the perspective and be like, what are you doing this for? Like, are you doing this for yourself? Or are you doing it because you want to change the lives of the people that you're working with? And once I flipped that perspective away from me and got it on where it needed to be, like that changed everything. So it's about how can, like flipping that perspective is how can I take the perspective off, or how can I take that onus off myself and put it where it needs to go? Like how can I take that energy and transform it into something good? So I totally agree with that. And that is what rap kind of focuses on, is those tools that we have in our toolbox, um, on an everyday basis that help us, take that action that we need to take to just be better and to focus on what we need to focus on.
Yeah. And I just want to mention when you said like flipping the script, that's what changed the shame game for me as well, like related to my little endeavor into struggling with my mental health from like when I was 18 until
Yeah.
I started Outrun the Dark. There was like a 10-year gap where I didn't talk to anyone about it. Because
Yeah.
like I lived abroad and I didn't live at home, so I could just not talk about it, and I was fine with that. And whenever something related to mental health came up, I would just freeze up and don't say a word.
Yeah.
And I was just like that shame just grew and grew and grew, and it wasn't until I flipped the script and started talking about it, but it went from
Yeah.
something that I wanted to tell to rather how can I help people who are going through the same or something similar or have it worse than me? How can I use my story for something good? And
Right.
then the shame was just gone. It was just like someone has turned on the light in a darkened room or in a cellar. Like it was just like no shame there anymore. Like of course, like telling the nitty-gritty details about what I did and whatnot, that's still like hard for me to do. But in general, like I have no shame about it compared to what
Right.
I had. So that's like super helpful.
Yeah.
It's a great
I
tip.
saw this quote that like shame ends when stories are told in safe spaces or something like that. It was like shame ends when stories are told in safe spaces. And I fully believe that and know that to be true, because we're all storytellers, right? Like we all have a story. Um, and I really think that the more that we share in community, the more we heal, right? Because it's healing. That's what we're doing. We're healing as we tell these stories. Um, and I think the more that we bottle them up and push them down, the more disservice that we're doing to our integrity and ultimately taking accountability for our actions and what we've done. Um, so yeah.
100%. And yeah, just to be clear, I think like safe space is the key here. Like I didn't start telling the whole world everything,
Yeah.
like it's super important, and
Yeah.
it's gonna look very different for each person, and some never want to share, and that's fine too. I just think that there lies so much power in that sharing. You just have to find the right level that you want to share on, and also that the person that you're sharing to is willing and want to hear it, and
Yeah.
is like a safe person to share it with. I know Brené Brown talks about this in one of her many brilliant books. She talks about
Yeah.
floodlighting. Have you heard this term?
Yeah.
It's like when you overshare to anyone who's like just passing you by, and the
Yeah.
effect is you have the deer stuck in the headlights.
Yeah.
and the recipient just freezes because it doesn't know what to do. And this can happen online, it can happen in real life, and I'm sure we've all had this. I'm guessing
Yeah.
the modern term is like trauma dumping, which I think is like a
Yeah.
fairly
Yeah.
that's like a stigmatized term by itself. But
Yeah.
I think like floodlighting is a great term for it, and you have to be aware. It's like you have a responsibility as well as the messenger as well as the receiver of someone's story. So definitely like be wary when sharing, but find your people or some way or someone to share with.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. Have you've been 20 plus years in the field? Like, what are some good like
Yeah.
starting points for someone who wants maybe to be a bit more open about their past or their mental health conditions? What are some like pointers or ways they should go about it, you think?
I think that everyone should go to therapy at least once in their life for for at least, a couple sessions, just to experience what that's like to tell your story to someone safe, who's going to hold that and be a container for that. It doesn't always happen with friends or relatives, but having that neutral kind of hearer or listener, who can take that in and help you process that, I think is really helpful. And not just individual therapy, but group therapy. Being in a room full of people who have experienced similar situations to your own, is powerful, is really powerful. And it's not just formal therapy groups. It can be something like AA or NA or Al-Anon or a mental health group or a survivors group, or whatever that looks like in your community, or whatever you associate with. That can be really helpful. Um, writing your story is helpful, even if it goes nowhere. It doesn't have to be published into the next New York Times bestseller. Like, just having that story out on paper, can do wonders for you. Just, as that, if we want to use the word, that trauma dump, like, into paper. Having a friend or a confidant, or seeking out a workshop. There's lots of workshops online, that help facilitate groups of people telling their stories in safe spaces. And that's where I found a lot of community during the pandemic. Just seeking out these workshops and these writing workshops and these storytelling workshops to just really, you know, have someone hear you. Um, and that makes me think of, when I was in grad school in San Francisco, I remember this one homeless person, um, came up. There was three of us sitting on a bench, just, between classes or whatever, and they were pushing their cart of their whole life belongings, and they just stopped and started telling us their story. And I thought that was so poignant, because it's like people just need to be heard. Like, they just want to be heard. And they want to be validated, and they want to be held in that moment, by someone who listens. And even if we couldn't give them advice, or we couldn't give them, resources, we could at least give them the gift of listening, which is so important sometimes. Just having that ear to hear someone is brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's something lacking in the today's society as well, and how much we've forgotten how important it is just to be um, witnessed, just to be
Yeah,
seen and heard
yeah,
as a human. And
for
I'm
sure.
sure you guys maybe couldn't give guidance to the person talking to you that day, but you heard his story, and that's
Yeah,
important in itself.
yeah,
Another question that came up here when we're talking about um like writing your story in those workshops, that's kind of how I got into being comfortable about sharing my story as well, like writing. That's like super helpful
Yeah.
because then you can like feel it on paper just for yourself. And
Yeah.
I think that's a super helpful way to start if you're struggling to share whatever story you have to tell. But over to the trauma responses and the floodlighting. We talked about freeze.
Yeah.
And there's four. This is news to me until I listened to your recent podcast you did. There's four trauma responses now. There's fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze, or fawn. What's fawn? Can you
Right.
talk us? Can you talk us through that? Because
Yeah.
I think I might be guilty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of this this trauma response to um this fear, and it's kind of this extreme people pleasing. It's kind of like going to the extreme to placate people who have hurt you or don't understand your story. So it's this desire to people please, and to really like to hold back what you have and your gifts, in order to placate someone else. So I think we see this a lot in women, and men too, who have like been silenced, who have had their voice taken away, which is why I love the theme of the TEDx event that I'm going to, which is amplifying silent voices, because I think that everybody who has had trauma, or experienced trauma has had the experience of having their voice be taken away. Um, so I think that, you know, amplifying silent voices is a beautiful way to rip down those kind of walls of layers that we've put up to protect ourselves, and really just stripping down and hearing the voices of those who have been silenced, whether it's because of disability or just your place in life or where you feel that you are, or truly being silenced, by a government or by another another form. We see that happening here in the United States, as the voices of immigrants are being silenced, the voices of LGBTQ people are being silenced, and that's never
Yeah.
okay. That's never
No.
okay. So
So that's just so I
yeah.
understand correctly. So fawning, could that show up like completely hypothetical example? But if you were grew up with someone aggressive around you, and you'd like placate them or fawn to them in order to kind of keep the peace, that could like show up later in
Yeah.
life if you have a boss or someone who raises their voice, and instead of disagreeing, you're just very agreeable
y- yeah.
and fawn to them
Or
rather
I'll
than
take care
speak
of
your
that. I'll take that. I'll take care of that.
yeah.
Yeah. Let the burden be on me. I'll take care of it. I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do whatever you need to make this situation okay.
Yeah.
I think is where we see that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also codependence then, I guess, like it will show
Yeah.
up.
In a way
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. And you mentioned your TEDx event. We haven't talked about that yet. So
Yeah.
later, you have a pretty hectic schedule coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us about you're talking at a TEDx event in Finland,
Yeah.
which really is
In
in my neck
Finland.
of the woods. Yeah, tell us about
Yeah.
that.
So, October 18th in Helsinki, Finland is the Amplifying Silent Voices TEDx event. And I will be speaking there, doing my first TED Talk. So I'm very excited. And I tell a little bit about my story and what helps me, and a lot of what we've talked about, today, kind of condensed into 12 minutes, or 15 minutes. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey to kind of like condense your story into a really short amount of time and cover some really salient pieces that are important to tell. But yeah, so if anyone is in Finland on October 18th, please come to the Museum of Technology and um, yeah, it would be great to see you. So, um, yeah, and
That's awesome.
um, I hope to when I go to Finland, meet up with some people who are doing peer support in Finland and some of the work that they're doing with open dialogue, which is a different way of looking at psychosis that I don't know a whole lot about, but I hope to learn more about their approaches to mental health in Finland. So that'll be exciting too. That'll be exciting too.
Cool. That's very cool, and I'm so happy for you that more people get to hear you and your story. And I think talking to many people over the years, a lot of them have, a lot of people in the mental health space has a story or are working with people who have stories, but you have
Yeah.
both, which I've found like unique. And whenever I ask you for advice or I have questions, it's you often speak about trauma informed care, but it's
Yeah.
all but it's like is that just experience from it? Just trauma informed care just means that you have lived experience, or is that like knowledge and education about uh trauma as well?
Yeah, I think
The
it's
terms.
both.
Okay.
Like, I think I speak from experience and always try to respond to someone openly in the way that I would want to be responded to. It's kind of that golden rule principle of treat others as you would have them treat you. And I think that's part of trauma informed care. And I also think that, after doing this for so many years, it's like, how can we how can we approach people in a way that minimizes harm? How can we really have people? How can we create an environment of being held and being a container for their stories and for their experiences when it might just look annoying or it might just be, like we're really worried about this person or like how can we provide them that container of being held and I've noticed that we work together on some of those tough cases in in the group when we see someone maybe talking about suicide or those other hard topics that no one really likes to hit head on and that's someone's truth so we have to be respectful of that and really approach it with dignity and vulnerability as well.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I want to go to next. It's a perfect transition because one of the things that I've learned a lot about from you is boundaries. And as a long time, just recently, maybe in this podcast, even diagnosed fawner, someone who will placate themselves just to get out of any situation.
Yeah.
This is something I struggle with a lot, both in like my personal and professional life. If you're fawning and you realize that I'm guessing the first step is like realizing that you are placating to someone, that you are acting in some form of codependency. But how like do you
Yeah.
get out of that circle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's different for everyone. But I think that boundaries are a really good place to start. Um, it's so hard to set boundaries, right? We don't like confrontation. We don't like to speak up for ourselves all the time. We don't like to cause rifts or, like we don't want that person to be mad at us, but it goes beyond that, right? We have to um we have to put up some and boundaries are are walls, right? But they're also like you can see through them. You can see what's on the other side. And you can decide when the wall comes down and you can decide when the wall goes up. That's the power of boundaries. Um, but but just holding that line and holding that line with yourself as well, like, kind of putting boundaries on yourself is really important too, and I think that that's something that we don't talk about very much, creating boundaries for ourself, um, as opposed to creating boundaries for other people. Um, I think, I see it sometimes in people maybe in the group who are, going back to what I talked about in the beginning is, like, oh, like tore my ACL, but going out for a 5K, like that's a boundary. Like, don't put yourself through that. Like, what are you like? What is the end game of that? Like what is that all about? Why are you pushing yourself to an unhealthy standard? And how can you set a boundary to say like, I'm hurt and I need to rest, and that's my boundary. And giving that grace to yourself is so important. And that's what a boundary is, right? And saying, okay, instead of going and pushing myself to the point where I'm really injured, um, I'm going to allow myself to rest. And rest is a boundary, right? Rest is a boundary. Um, and rest is something that I don't see very many people doing, because I think in our society we push and we push and we go and we go. But when do we rest? When do we allow ourselves rest? So um, if I could say anything, I would say rest is a healthy boundary. To
That's a very good point. And just use myself as an example. I am getting a lot better at like listening to my own body and setting boundaries
Yeah,
like physically. But
yeah,
where I hit like snags is when there's other people involved. So I've talked with you previously about setting boundaries towards other people who might be going through something, and it's like want something from me, and for me, setting a boundary like not to respond after a certain time or giving them, my best but nothing more, for me, it's problematic because it hurts more for me, like on the inside, to
yeah,
hold the line rather than just
right,
to help them. So for me, like
right,
I'd rather empty my own tank until I pass out rather than hold the line
yeah,
with and still have energy left on the tank. Like how can I is there any way around that? Does it get better with time, or is it just that's just
yeah.
part of the gig?
I think it's both. I think it gets better with time, and as you practice setting boundaries, I think it gets better and it gets easier, because we see that nothing bad happens, right? We think that if we set a boundary, something bad will happen if we don't. If we go above and beyond that boundary, right? Like the person's going to die, or they're going to be so dysregulated that they, do something to harm themselves. Like, no. Like if that person needs that level of help, that's beyond what you or I can do. If that person is really going to take acts of furtherance on their life or on their, on them or hurting themselves, that's a level of care that we can't provide, right? That's something that they need to call their local crisis team or get some support through 988 or something like that. That's not something that we have control over. And it's unfortunate that we get sucked into that, that situation. But saying, "Hey, I've done all I can on my end. Um, Now I'm turning this over to you." Um, and it's boundaries set up accountability. which is really important. Boundaries set up accountability. Um, and there's a point in time where people need to take accountability for their actions and accountability for what they're doing as far as their wellness goes. And we have no control over that. That's something that's totally out of our control. As much as we'd like it to be in our control as helpers and as people who want to do the best for that person, it doesn't always work out that way. And the best that we can do is say, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. But, and, and I guess is the right word to say, and I can't do anymore. um, I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you in whatever way I can, and I'm at my limit as far as what I can do. So, if you need the crisis team, I can help you facilitate that, but as far as my journey in this goes, I'm tapping out. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And
it's hard.
that's
It's
yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, and how do you, this is also an audience question. How do you know where the boundary line is when helping someone close to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think it's different for everyone. Um, but I think as we get to know ourselves, we know what that line is. The more that we kind of go inside and realize that this is kind of my breaking point, or this is my stopping point, and knowing that and knowing yourself. I think that people who have poor boundaries are people who don't know themselves very well, um, who either can't take that accountability or just haven't done the work, um, to really be in that place of saying, hey, I have done everything I can. um, this is on you, and how can I support you? How can I help you? But, this is what I can do. And even offering solutions and saying, I can give you advice, I can listen silently, I can call the crisis team with you, I can get you a ride to a crisis center, but after that, my journey ends and you have to take some control of this. Um yeah, and it's hard for help. I think it's hard as a helper, that's difficult sometimes.
Yeah. And like in defense of the helpers with the poor boundaries, I think the boundaries are non-existent, and then you realize how problematic it is not to have boundaries. So
Right.
you start off with zero boundaries, and then you get to know yourself, and then you realize you can't take that much, and then you start putting up boundaries, and then it becomes really hard, right? So
Yeah,
you always start in that kind of end of things, which makes it
right.
harder, of course. But yeah, like I said, that's something you helped me with, and I love that concept. You said that boundaries are movable, see-through walls, and not or did you, they're not like they're not walls that can't be moved, because I've always thought about boundaries as walls that once they're there, I've closed out the other person. I'm not helping them. They're gonna hurt themselves, etc. But it's really helpful to think of it as see-through walls that are movable. That makes it less daunting to put some down around you. Um, and and then another helper um, question, and something that goes pretty much straight through this conversation we're having today is like, when you are the support person or helper in any situation, and the person you're helping does not want to be helped.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
very
that's a
normal occurrence in mental
yeah,
health in general, and you're kind of, the disease itself or the illness itself doesn't want you to help the person. Like, how do you even begin to tackle that, riff on it as you like?
yeah, That's a hard one, and that's, I think, one of my biggest empathy gaps, and I call them empathy gaps because, I think that's a great term for it, as opposed to, like, one of my things that I struggle with or something, but, I think of myself as a very empathic person, but when someone doesn't want help and I truly see the need for it, like, and they don't want it, that's hard. That's really hard. But I have learned that unless the person wants it for themselves, you're gonna make little to no difference in that person if you stay on them, right? So it's thinking about the stages of change really, and that pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, relapse, cycle, that are the stages of change, right? So when we think of a person in pre-contemplation, they don't see that what they're doing is a problem. So the best that we can do is ask questions, and ask a lot of questions and ask really open-ended questions like, how do you see this going in a year? Like where do you see yourself in a year, if you continue on this kind of path that you're on right now? Or, like how do you see this impacting your life? And asking just a lot of questions, about behavior and about feelings and about what they're doing. And maybe something will hit, and move them to a place of being like, oh, this actually might be a problem, um, for me, and what can I do to get out of this space. And so it's really tough, I think, because we want people to be in action. We want them
Yeah.
to be doing something to better
Mm-hmm.
themselves. We want them to be going to therapy, taking their meds, um, going to visit with their case manager, or doing this or doing that. Like we want action. We want to see action. But that's not always where somebody's at. So we have to like rewind and be like, okay, let's go back to the beginning. How is this impacting you? Like you sleep outside, you hardly eat at all, like how is this impacting you? And is this something that you want to keep up long term? And if it is, then you have to deal with that. Like, okay, a choice that you've made. But I can't support you on that. And that then it comes back to boundaries again, right? Like saying if you choose this life for yourself, you're gonna choose it without me in it. Because I can't support you in this. Um, Whatever, if that's a destructive behavior or whatever the person is dealing with. But sometimes we lose people because of boundaries. And ultimately that might be the biggest gift that you could give them, um, is that loss of that relationship, because that might be the catalyst for them to change. And relationships can always be repaired, right? Like there's always a sense of reparation that can happen. But in that moment, sometimes letting go is the greatest gift that we can give that person. Um, because relationships change and they evolve and they dissolve sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just the natural progression of things. Um, but it's really up to that person. It's really up to that person.
Yeah. I it's a very helpful way to see it, or like you mentioned before, that boundaries creates accountability. Like I have never thought about it that way, because I always thought that boundaries was something I did for myself and not something for the other person, but it totally does. Like it's like in some way I might be, even not helping them with like doing everything for them, right? So yeah, that's super helpful way of seeing it. So yeah, thanks for that. And to end the discussion on boundaries, since you're so involved in so many patients' life yourself, how do you personally manage to kind of protect yourself from getting too involved in patients' lives, or maybe when you had a more involved position, but like how do you protect your own mental health?
Yeah. That was something that I needed to do when I was actively, like, seeing clients. Like, I don't that's not my role anymore, but, and that was a conscious choice that I made, actually. Like, it was a conscious choice that I made, to not want to be involved in direct client care anymore. But one thing, it's like it's so hard because, if you work in a bank, at the end of the day, you count your drawer and then you reconcile everything and then you're done. And you can go home and you can, watch your TV shows and you can, but when you're dealing with people's lives, like that's a whole different ball of wax. Like that's a whole different story, dealing with someone's life. Um, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes back to self-care, and how we handle those moments. So is it decompressing by listening to music on the way home, or listening to a podcast on the way home, or getting home and taking a shower, or getting home and getting out of your work clothes. It's just something to mentally shift you into that place of rest and into that place of taking care of yourself. Is it after, after I eat my meal, I'm gonna, just watch a half an hour show on Netflix or whatever it is. But how do we let go of our day? But I think that that's so important, is how do we do that letting go? Um, and one thing that keeps us from letting go is having poor boundaries, right? So, there have been nights that I have brought home work with me, work home with me, and I've stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about somebody and thinking about their problems and that was my poor boundaries, right? Um, but it's inevitable when we work with people's lives. It's inevitable. Um, but it's going back and being like, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking about this person. How can I shut this off? And changing this, like go get a cup of tea, go, sit outside and look at the moon, or read a chapter in a book, but do anything you can to like separate yourself from that. Because if you don't, it's gonna lead to burnout and compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. You don't want that. Because that'll just, yeah. But those are the things that do lead to burnout and that compassion fatigue. And that's even harder to deal with than shutting your brain off at night.
Yeah. And how, since you've been like went from being a patient at said facility and then running it, like how has that been, that journey
Yeah.
from your side?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my lived experience gives me a unique perspective into the life of a patient and what that means, to be labeled that. Um, and then, like going through my career and running, programs, once being a participant in case management and then running a case management
Mm-hmm.
program, um, it's a very it's in a way, it sometimes feels like full circle, right, for me, like, okay, I've completed the circle, like, it's full now, um, but I also have to separate myself from that, right, because, like, there are a lot of trauma responses that I have to being in the system, and I definitely could be that fawner at times, or that flight, like, I'm just gonna take off, and I'm gonna, do something different. Um, but it's it's been a unique journey, I will say that.
Yeah.
I will say that. Yep.
Yeah. Can you just explain very quickly what's a case management plan for the people not knowing?
Yeah, so case management is a service that, basically they're resource coordinators. They help
Yeah.
coordinate your care, whether that be psychiatric or medical or, any kind of other care that you might have, they kind of help you connect all the dots and
Okay.
uh, keep you, on top of your life and kind of help schedule appointments and go to appointments with you, and they can do all of that kind of resource coordination. Um, but yeah, it's usually for people who have been diagnosed with a serious mental health condition who might need some help putting their life together.
And what do you think you bring to that role that someone who doesn't have that lived experience could bring?
Yeah, I think it brings a unique perspective, and it brings that trauma informed perspective that we talked about a little bit. I think having been there goes a long way, and the stories that we can share. If somebody says like, "Oh, I just don't want to take another pill," I understand that. I totally get that feeling. And how can we talk through this? And how can we work with your doctor to maybe not get another pill? And how can we make this, a safe space for you to really express what you need to. How can you find your voice again, right? That's really the job that I want to do, is help people find their voice again. So it may go for advocating for them to them advocating for themselves.
That's a very beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit about how do you go from someone not having a voice to try and like entice them to come out of their shell and find their voice again?
Yeah. It's really a really personal process, I think, between you and that person. And I really think that building that relationship is the key. I always have said that relationships are the vehicle for change. Um, and I truly believe that, because I believe that building that rapport and building that sense of community and building that that reciprocal nature of belonging, and that kind of essence of learning together in the process, rather than just being someone who does everything for that person, but really just doing things with that person and really cultivating that experience. And I really think that through relationship, people can find their voice again. Those healthy relationships that you form with either your patients and your clients or people in your life, right? It's the same way that we make friends, right? We find somebody that we have something in common with, and then we connect on that level. And it's kind of this a parallel process for connecting with your clients. You find those threads of commonality, and then you weave them into this tapestry of a relationship, and it's really can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful way of putting it. And like since you've been through that whole journey yourself, I can only imagine you have like some authority with like that it's very helpful for the person you're speaking to and trying to help find their voice that you've actually lived it yourself.
That we're on, like, level playing field, right? It's not like this power differential, like, with some traditional, like, the psychiatrist is up here and knows all this, and, like, we're down here, and it's there with peer support, there's no power differential. We're just on level playing field, and we're right there to support each other.
Did you have like one instance or one time in your uh journey as a patient where you thought like this is rock bottom, or were you like not conscious of that at the time?
I don't think I was conscious of that at the time. I think, like, I lived at rock bottom for quite a few years. And I think I knew it, but I didn't wanna face that, right? Like, I didn't wanna be, "Oh gosh, these are absolutely the worst years of my life." I don't think any 23 or 24-year-old is equipped to deal with that at that age. Uh, so I don't think it was ever about, like, hitting rock bottom for me. It was just about, being in a place where I couldn't accept that this was all my life was gonna be.
Yeah. What do you wish someone told you at that point?
Oh, that's a really good question, Ziggy. I wish someone would, would have said this does get better. This will get better. Because it did, and it can't stay bad forever, right? And I wish that someone would tell me that I am the healer, like the healing comes from within rather than something outside of yourself, right? Um, there's meds you can take, that's helpful. There's therapists you can go to, that's helpful. There are things that, are prescribed for you that are helpful, supplements, physical therapy, regular therapy, all things that people can prescribe for you are helpful, but ultimately the healing comes from within. We are our own healers. Um, and it's what we do with the tools that we've been given. It's
Mm,
what we do with them that really makes that impact.
yeah. Beautifully put. Of course, given like be your own healer if your condition or illness allows you to think that way, right?
Yeah, I think that everybody can think that way eventually, right? I think we can all get to that point. We just need a little clarity sometimes. And if taking, psych meds provides you that clarity, have at it. If talking to a therapist provides you that clarity, have at it. But I think that everybody has those moments of clarity where they can see like, hey, I don't want to be in this space anymore. I need help. Actually reaching out for help. Because that's how we heal. We heal through helping. We heal ourselves. We heal through others in our life, um, and community.
Yeah, 100%. Are you seeing any, since you're in the space, are you seeing any um changes on like the medicine front in terms of like I know like SSRIs have been around since the 80s and not much has
Yeah.
changed there, but is there some promise into like the new psychoactive drugs like psilocybin or ecstasy
Oh
or
yeah,
ketamine?
that's
Have you seen
interesting.
anything there that's promising?
I know that a lot of people have been trying ketamine for depression, and doing like guided microdosing of
Yeah,
psilocybin. But there has been a lot of like really promising research around that. I have not tried it.
yeah,
And I probably won't because just the medications that I'm on, um, I don't think it would be a great combination.
yeah.
Um, but it has been really promising for a lot of people, and I really encourage people to find what path of healing works for them. If it is, like ketamine or microdosing, like if that is what works for you, like that's brilliant. That's wonderful. For me, it's traditional, psychiatric medications that really help control my symptoms well. And I was lucky enough to find that combination that works. But it takes time. It really takes time, and it's really trial and error, to just really find what works for you. And for some people, it's just talk therapy. Some people it's no meds at all and no substances at all. It's just talking to someone, that makes all the difference. But you really have to find the path that works for you.
It's like talking to you about mental health and the care for people is very different than what I would assume like a mental health professional would say about their job, like about self-healing. You have to be your own healer. You have to find your own medicine, both prescriptive, but also what you prescribe for yourself. You have to find your voice. Like, there's a lot of things here that I think are like very powerful concepts that are can be very helpful for the person in need. Uh, but still, I see just mental health in I can only speak for Europe, but still has a long way to go. Like I still feel we're in the stone age of mental health. Like, what do you see is like the biggest things that are not happening in the field of mental health today?
Yeah, I think that, I wish there would be more of an emphasis on peer support, because I think that peer support is really key to having people open up and maybe take a new direction in their healing. And it's still even though it's been around for 20 years, I think it's or even longer than that. In the 70s they were doing peer support. But I think that, the concept of walking alongside of someone, um, and really becoming immersed in their journey and having them become immersed in your journey, um, and really truly partnering with someone in that way is really powerful. It's really powerful to sit in a room with somebody and have them understand what you're going through from
Mm,
that lived experience perspective. Rather than just a therapist saying, "Oh, that sounds really hard," or "Oh, that must have been really difficult for you," is having somebody say, "Yes, I know. I was there. I walked that walk, and now I'm in this place and we can get you there. It's just going to take a little hard work." Um, yeah. So I see a lot of hope on the horizon for those more rehabilitative services, um, as opposed to habilitative services, which are just maintenance and being static and keeping yourself stable. It's like, what does stable mean? Stable looks different for everyone. It's like the question of normal, like what is normal? Normal looks different for everyone. But so does stable and so does maintenance, right? Like let's just maintain. We'll do this, we'll go to therapy, we'll seek out treatment, we'll take their meds. Like that's the stabilization. That's not really having a person live their best life.
no. Can you just briefly explain what peer support is in the context of, because I'm
Yeah,
sure it
so it's
looks
it's
different in Europe.
Yeah, so it's basically someone who has a lived experience of a mental health condition or who has been diagnosed or self-diagnosed with a mental health condition because of trauma or being part of the system or having a crisis in their life. But anybody who has been touched by mental health, kind of partnering with another person, um, a- and and going through a journey together, um, through that lived experience, and really forming a strong partnership, and letting that partnership and that relationship really guide the other person on their journey, um, and really learning together and being present and um, saying we're not going to let fear kind of get in the way of this journey. So it's really that partnership and that relationship that's key.
Is it like similar to the dynamics of like an AA sponsor, or is that
Yeah,
different?
kind of. Yeah, in a way, yes. Because that person has their own lived experience and wants truly to give back to others,
Yeah.
and help others on their journey. So yeah. And the beautiful thing about like AA and NA and Al-Anon is that it is like a peer support group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's people with their own experience of it saying like this is how we healed, this is how we got
Yeah.
better, and sharing those poignant stories, um, those
Yeah.
meaningful stories. Yeah.
And would that like would that like, does the peer supporter like join all the meetings related to the patient's illness
They
or
should.
condition? Yeah.
Yeah,
Are they allowed
they
to?
should be right there at the They should be right there at the table. The person should be right there at the table. I really believe we need to we need to have people taking a more active role in their treatment, rather than just saying, like, here's your treatment plan, just sign the bottom and I'll fill out the rest. Like, no, like, we should be writing our treatment plans. If we're going to have a treatment plan, we should be a part of that. And really have people take in a more active role in their treatment.
Yeah, and it just makes sense from a, you know, uh evolutionary standpoint, where we've
Yeah.
always as society have helped each other out, and the elders would help the younger generation grow up with their issues and ills.
Yeah.
And that's really the best of both worlds, if we can use the lived
Yeah.
experience ourselves to help someone else going through it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's,
Absolutely.
yeah, pretty much what Outrun the Dark tries to do on on a much
Yeah.
larger but maybe more superficial scale, but still, I think it
Yeah.
tends
It
towards
is what it's
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So so let's go a little bit into your running journey, because it's like
Yeah.
fairly fresh, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's been
And you
about
went, yeah, you went pretty
6
hard
years.
in your, you
Yeah.
went pretty hard when you first started. So tell us how
Yeah.
running became a part of your life.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I I was with my partner, my former partner, and she hated that I smoked, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna quit." So, quitting became this journey for her in the beginning, right? It was about like, I'm gonna quit for her and blah 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 blah. But like 2 or 3 weeks in, I was like, "Wow, this is really good for me." Like, I'm not wheezing anymore, and I can taste my food and I can smell, and, it was like all these great things happening. And, I was like, "Wow, I'm doing this for me. Like, I'm doing this for myself." And it just stuck, and I was like, "What can I do, instead of sitting around smoking, like, what can I do?" And one night, my parents were going for a walk around our neighborhood, um, and eventually they said, "Yeah, we're gonna go back." And I was like, "I'm gonna keep on walking." And I thought, well, if I can walk, can I jog? Like, can I go fast? Like, so I just started like running down the street, and I was in like Converse sneakers, like no fancy, like Brooks or anything. I was just like running in Converse, and I was like, wow, I can actually do this. I can actually do this. And I needed to take some walk breaks, and I was fairly out of shape at that point and a lot heavier. Um and I was like, I can actually do this. So I was like, I set a goal. It was September, I think, when I started that first night of running. And I was like, my goal is to run a 5K by the end of the year. Well, this 5K presented itself in October. And I thought, well, I'm gonna keep running and I'm gonna do this. So there I was. It took me like 55 minutes to finish this 5K, but I did it. I finished it and I was like on top of the world. And that's just what kick-started my fitness journey. And then I got really serious about it during the pandemic, because the gyms were closed. So I started running, and I didn't stop. And then the gyms after things got better with COVID, the gyms reopened, and I started swimming and biking, stationary biking, and still running. And um you know I did what I thought I could do, and I run 2 half marathons, and I've done like 6 indoor triathlons, and I went hard there in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, and now it's just something that I do that brings me joy. Like, I don't put pressure on myself to run. I don't have to run every day, but when I do, I really enjoy it, and I it's something that I love. And I worked out this morning. I didn't run, but I worked out, and it's still something. Moving my body is still something that brings me joy. So, it went from running in those old stinky Converse to, a whole journey of wellness and fitness, and it, you know, turned out pretty well.
Yes, it did. And those triathlons, like how far do you swim? How far do you
Yeah,
bike?
so I don't have a gym membership anymore up here, so I don't swim very often, but
Mm,
when I would swim at least like 1,000 meters at a time. Um, and then the sprint triathlons I did were like a 500-meter swim and then like a 14-mile bike and then a 5K.
yeah,
So all of those combined. And then I did
yeah.
one Olympic distance triathlon where it was a 1,500-meter swim and a 29 or 39-mile bike and then a 10K. So that was the longest triathlon I did. But yeah, longest I've ever
That's
run
amazing.
is a half marathon, and um, that was the longest triathlon I ever did. And I've biked about like 26 miles in a go in like a one in like 90 minutes. So that's about the longest bike I've ever done. But that was like a 40K on the bike. So that's about my limit being on the bike.
Yeah. Oh, that's a crazy change and a very hard start for someone who's just like started out doing
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. So, but my lungs thank me for it. You
yeah,
know,
I can
I
imagine.
it's I would have loved to see like a scan of my lungs like before, like while I was a smoker and what they look like now because your body heals itself. Like, your body repairs itself. So it would be interesting to see that.
Yes, totally. And do you like when now you say you run like for the joy of it and you exercise for the joy of it? Do you have any specific ways you do that? Do you run without any technology or do you
Always run with music. I always run
yeah,
with music. And sometimes I listen to like weird music, like when I run, like instead of just listening to like, like hip hop
weird
or
music?
like like I sometimes listen to like Tibetan bowls, like the sound of Tibetan bowls or like some weird like Hindu meditation music. Like I'll listen to that. Like I don't know, whatever I'm in the mood for. It's just, sometimes I feel like I need it more of like a meditation run, where I'm not focusing on speed or distance or anything, just like to get out of my head, and I'll put on meditation music or something and just go, whether it's a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles, it doesn't matter. It's just going for the sake of going. Um, yeah.
You seem to be in like a continuous flow state. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I try to be as mindful and as present as I can, as much as I can. Like there are times when I don't think about the past that much. I try to just really focus on the moment. Um and I try not to think about the future that much either because I think we can future trip like so much about like where am I going? What am I doing? What do I have to do in the next month, 5 years, 10 years? But I try to be mindful and I just try to be um purposeful about what I'm doing.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about future tripping?
Yeah, it's when you you really like get caught up in what thinking about what could be or what should be. And that's just dangerous. So thinking about what is and what is now, is just so much. It's just such an easier place to be. Um, yeah, and just being mindful of that is really important.
When you talked about your running and listening to Tibetan sounds
Yeah, yeah,
and like
yeah,
how you have fun with the things that you're doing in your day to day. You paint, you do things that brings you joy, and
yeah.
it reminds me of this. quote. I'll see if I can find it from Anne Lamott. She's a writer.
Oh, yes.
You know her? Okay. Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's
So this
amazing.
just this quote just came to me when you were speaking about your running and all the things you do for joy. Um, and it's about perfectionism. So she says that I think perfectionism is based on the obsessive belief that if you run carefully enough, hitting each stepping stone just right, you won't have to die. The truth is that you will die anyway, and that a lot of people who aren't even looking at their feet are going to do a whole lot better than you and have a lot more fun while they're doing it. And I
Yeah.
think
That's
that's
beautiful.
that's what you're doing right now. I feel
Beautiful.
like you're not
Yeah.
looking at your feet anymore. You're just having fun with it.
No. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And doing something not because doing something not because it makes you thin or because, it challenges you, but just doing it
Yeah.
for joy is a completely different animal than if you're forcing yourself to do it or feeling like you need to or that that's your only out, it's finding those other things that bring you joy too.
Yeah, 100%. You spoke about future tripping, but there's also such a thing as past tripping, right? And we spoke briefly about my nostalgia for the 90s, and I believe that's like
Yeah.
that's like past tripping as well, but although in a much like not related to my own life, but like to a time that I wasn't part of in the same way. But what does like
Yeah.
past tripping mean to you? Like, how does that? Is it the same as future
Yeah.
tripping? It's just the past, or
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. Like I think that, we can think about what happened to us ad nauseum, right? We can think about all those things that went wrong or that we did. Everybody said like, if you could, what do you have regrets about? What do you have regrets about? Like it's like let that go. Like it happened, it's done. Like where can we how can we be present? Like how can we take those things, make them a learning experience and grow from them, instead of just focusing on what we did bad or what we did wrong or the stories that we tell ourselves. Like how can we tell ourselves a new story, a present story, a mindful story. Yeah.
yeah? And how do you view that part of your life? Do you have any regrets, or is it more like that's just fuel to the fire that you have today? Like, how do you view that, your past?
Yeah. I do. I think I have some regret. Like I always said when I was in my 20s, I was very ill and I had a cat and the cat was sick and when I took her to the vet, I couldn't be with her when they put her down. I was just too emotionally like dysregulated and I always said like if I ever have another cat, I will be with them until they take their very last breath, and I have been with all my cats. But I regret not being with her, um, when she was, dying, and be there. I couldn't emotionally be present during that experience. So I do regret that, but that's really, I but I course corrected and, I said I'm never gonna do that again, and I didn't. Because all of my cats that I've had since then, I've been with them,
Yeah,
until till they have passed. So,
yeah,
um, took that as a learning experience, right? So instead of a regret, right, it's a learning experience, and it's a way to change. It's just a catalyst for change.
yeah. And also like accepting where you
Yeah,
were at that point, right? Because you didn't, it was not like 100% logical choice where
right,
it was a coin toss if you wanted to do it or not. Like you physically or emotionally wasn't able to, right? So like
right.
showing
And
that
it's
past version
funny
of
that
you love.
yeah, I have the words acceptance and change tattooed on me. And I have the acceptance has a picture of a caterpillar and the change has a picture of a butterfly. And I really see that. I really believe that you can't change until you've really come to a place of acceptance of where you're at. And once you come to that place of acceptance, then you allow change to come in. And then you're open for change. But it really comes through acceptance.
That's deep. Have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's a good journaling prompt for me tomorrow.
Yeah, for
Acceptance and
sure. For
change.
sure.
Yeah, because I think whenever I've tried to do changes, it usually comes from a point of not being good enough or wanting to become better, right? And when you do that, it's usually from a not from a point of weakness necessarily, but from a point of not feeling good enough as you are. And if you get the acceptance part right, then you can easier more easily do the things you want to change as well, I presume. Um, so yeah, that's a helpful frame that you have there. You seem so like purposeful in the work you're doing now, and also kind of the direction you're going with your story and your past, and using it for good. Do you have like a specific purpose that you want to that you're working towards, or like a goal, like a long-term goal in
Yeah.
mind, or
No, I don't think so. It's funny. I try not to think that far ahead. I have goals, and like writing is definitely a goal, and doing more public speaking is definitely a goal, and continuing in my work, because my work is very important to me. Continuing to grow in my career is really important, but beyond that, it's like I've just been trying to take everything day by day.
yeah, and being in that flow state, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. As much as I can.
As much as you can. That's good. And who are some, you mentioned some people earlier, but who are some people that inspire you, mentors or inspirations that you look up to and want to?
Yeah. Definitely my parents were, well, my dad's gone, but my mom is a big influence in my life, and my parents have really shaped who I am as a person, so, grateful to them, and, um, have a lot of, like, really beautiful friends. I'm going to visit my best friend of 30 some years, over the Labor Day weekend next weekend, and haven't seen her in a few years, so I'm excited to reconnect with her, and she's been a big influence in my life and a big supporter. She's known me since I was 17, so
Hmm,
before all of this started to happen, she's known me, seen me through my whole kind of illness and wellness journey, and that's really special to have a person like that in your life. And um, yeah, so lots of good friends, and lots of people on the internet who I've connected with and become friends with, just in their work and what they do, and supporting their art, and their creative process has been really beautiful. And um people I've worked with who have become mentors, and um you know it's been really a wonderful ride so far.
that's amazing to hear. And I know since you've already given me so many tips, like privately on books and resources, do you have any like today, any like go-to resources for people? Anything related to mental health or finding your inner voice or yeah,
I mean, Brene Brown is brilliant, and
yeah.
uh even like some of the more
Any books in specific you would recommend starting with, or is like anything goes?
anything goes. Rising Strong is a really good one to start with, I think. Her book, called Rising Strong, and Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, is brilliant. And
Yeah.
um, Bex King wrote a book called Good Vibes, Good Life that's really good. Um, My friend Jennifer Pasteloff just wrote a book called Proof of Life, which is really brilliant.
Hmm.
Um, let's see, who else? I'm just looking at some of the books. Um,
One of the books you recommended me was The Body Keeps the Score.
oh yes, that's a really good one too. That's by Bessel van der Kolk. Um, a really good book on if someone wants to like know more about the journey of someone with schizophrenia. There's a book by Ellen Sachs called The Center Cannot Hold. And it's a really beautiful look at her journey with schizophrenia and how it impacted her life as a law professor. So that's a really brilliant book too. And Annie Rogers wrote a book called The Unsayable, which is one of the best books on trauma I've ever read. Um, but that's a really great book as well. Um, so yeah, lots of great stuff to read.
Yeah, that's great. And as we're coming towards the end here, is there anything else that we haven't covered or that you want to share?
Gosh, no. I think we
Uh,
covered so much, Siggy.
I think so too. Yeah, that was. I thought like I knew most of. I thought I had like emptied the Tara bank for goodies in terms of gems, just
Yeah.
like tidbits on
Yeah.
mental health and whatnot. But
For sure.
yeah, there was still a lot more to find there. So I'm really glad that we finally got the time to sit down
Yeah.
and talk.
For sure.
Super
Yeah,
helpful
it's great.
and I'm not sure how the future's gonna look for me or Outrun in the Dark, but I do feel like some kinship to the ideas that you're talking about, using the story for something good and helping other find their voice. I think that's really a good way to summarize your what you're doing, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Trying to. Yeah. Yeah. For
Yeah,
sure.
trying to and doing a good job at it, but
Thank
also
you.
finding joy for yourself while doing it. That part is
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
clear. So now
Right.
I'm just super grateful for you taking the time and sitting down to
Yeah.
talk with me and
Siggy.
sharing some of your thoughts, and always super helpful. And let's have a talk a little bit later and then see what you're up to with your writing and your keynote
Yeah.
speaking.
For sure. Thank you so much, Siggy.
Great. Very welcome. Thank you.